everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton here at fmtraining.tv, where every day we are doing awesome FileMaker training. Some days you are training me, so it's a two-way street. We talked about this last week with Jesse Barnum, the fact that this platform is so amazingly great that we can solve a great number of challenges with it, business challenges. And as a result of that, that makes you a very highly desirable person in an organization. So for you to come on to a team, work with a team, you're delivering business efficiency to them. Very, very, very exciting. We call you FileMaker doctors, or your business doctors. We're trying to cure the cancer in the business, right? As a reminder, if you want to support the channel, if you everything about this show is based at fmtrain.tv. If you go to the left, you can see the upcoming broadcast schedule. Press the bundle, support the channel. We greatly appreciate it. That's how we pay the bills and keep everyone going. So Claris the other day released FileMaker 23, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, something like that. Jacob Taylor, maybe 8 weeks ago, something like that. And so they, after that, they released an update to the product. And the other part of that was that that people were asking under the hood questions. So Claris came back and decided that they would do an under the hood session. So that is available on YouTube. It's a YouTube link that they did this. So Clay Mackel got under there. Lucy Chin, who I've actually never really ever talked to. And she's funny because she is the most important kind of leader, shall we say, in the world of FileMaker at the Wedge, or what used to be the Wedge headquarters, Claris headquarters, which is now at the Box. It used to be the Wedge. Lucy Chin is the VP of FileMaker Engineering. For those of you who thought Peter Nelson was the VP of Engineering, he's a VP of Engineering, the new. So we have two VPs of Engineering. So she was on this event. And I think I've spent, as important as she is, and as many times I've been to Claris, I think I've said 2 words to her once in a parking lot, right? Very interesting. So very smart, but her and Clay and these other folks, they're very, very important people. So if I go to claris.com, you can go there and watch this under the hood session. That being said, Claris, let me recap some basic stuff. Claris shipped FileMaker, what they call FileMaker 23, okay? But the version number is 20. FileMaker 23, I'll refer to that, but you might have Christian Schmitz refer to it as 20. So moving forward, so Claris did this under the hood session. It's very good. We're going to kind of critique and talk about that. But Jacob Taylor, they did an update about 10 days ago. So it was 20. It's FileMaker 23 update number 1, I guess, but it's the technical version is what, 20.1. What'd you say, 2? Is that what it was?
Yep. 2? Cool. Release day was 20.1.1, and then they patched it 20.1.2.
All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we just see these 3 people here popping up. There is his full face. So let's talk about this briefly. So today is an open Q&A. So the first question that Schmiegel asked is that, do I trust FileMaker Server 23 enough to install it and use it in a product? I'm going to put words in this person's mouth. Do I trust it enough to put it into production and use with my customers? Jacob Taylor.
Yes. You
kind of trust it? You really trust it? And look at the camera when you talk to us. Don't look around. There we go. There we go. We want to see, we want to make sure you're not winking. Like we really trust it. Wink, wink, wink. Right? No? Christian?
No, we put our development servers on it a week ago. Nothing has fallen over.
So okay. I would usually do some stage testing, like you would set up a demo machine in the weeks after the release. Then maybe after a month's passed and you don't have a bug fix release or something important showing up, a big bug, yeah, you can try it in production.
Yeah, the good news is that you can start using Pro and Go early. Right? You can use those with your older FileMaker server, in so much as that you have at least FileMaker Pro. Well, it's the cutoff is that 23 can talk all the way back to what, 19.4, Jacob Taylor?
That's 19.4.2.
Yep. 19.4.2. So if you have FileMaker 18, like I have an old Mac Pro that still works with FileMaker 18 on it, I can't do that anymore. I'm kind of bummed. But yes. So let's talk about the under the hood components of this thing. Along the way with questions, let's do this. So Christian Schmitz, under the hood, comments and thoughts from the event that went on. So for those of you interested, you could watch their event. Wasn't the most exciting event ever, but they were doing under the hood kind of technical stuff. So where do you guys start with this conversation?
The first thing I would say is it was a very polished event. They made a nice video about it. They cut a lot of bloopers. They speed up longer sections.
So it was a polished event. It was, I think it was pre-recorded, right? It was pre-recorded.
Yeah, it was pre-recorded. Yeah.
Pre-recorded. Yeah, that's always the challenge of doing live TV like this. For those of you watching this recording, that's fine. But if you watch it live, all the roughness and the rawness are always included for you to see. So, so there was conversation about. They spent some time talking about Docker. So just for a moment, let's talk about Docker and what that means. Jacob, Taylor, and Christian. I've never installed Docker. I know that it's like some sort of containerized operating system or app or something. So what is Docker? Why should I care about it?
Well, let's say you have a server, a big one with 20 CPU cores.
Okay.
And you could run on the server some virtualization software to run several VMs with Linux running in them and FileMaker Server.
Okay.
And now when you go with Docker, you basically skip the Linux there. You just run FileMaker in the container without running an operation system.
So not an operating system in the container, it's just the app, what you're saying, just the app, essentially?
Yeah. This saves you a lot of CPU and memory.
Okay, cool. Mr. Taylor, comments on that? And anything with Docker? That was that they're talking about Nginx and load balancing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big thing in their demo that I would point out is their Docker script can spin up a collection of FileMaker servers, not just one or something. And so, for example, his demo, which took a while, and as Christian noted, they accelerated the recording for that, just so we're not waiting 15 minutes or whatever. But you can, for example, ask this script that they wrote to spin up a cloud of FileMaker servers for you. So for example, you'd have the backend FMS and then some number of worker machines for WebDirect. And that's just, you ask the script and it goes, how many workers do you want? And you're like, I don't know. We got 100 per whatever. We have 300 clients. Fantastic. So you tell it 3 and it'll then bring 4 machines up for you. So you have 3 workers and then the FileMaker server backend. The script does that whole thing for you and it's ready to go at the end. That's really neat for testing and other purposes. As we even talked about previously, what's his name? The European host guy, Fabrice. Yeah, his FM Cloud FM. Sorry, that's his hosting service. They that's how their whole thing runs. Probably not using Claris' script, I assume, but early Docker work that they did, getting FileMaker Server together so that you could run it in that same kind of way. And then they turned it into a service that became their hosting service, basically. But you can now do this on your development machine.
The one thing I want to
command line, so be aware. But
the one thing I want to point out is that so let's talk about a situation where you need multiple worker machines. You need multiple worker machines, primarily if you have a lot of users who want to access the file. I fundamentally, if someone comes to me and says, Richard, I need more than one FileMaker server, essentially because we have all these people or these people are all distributed around the globe. Part of me, because I sat there with Jesse Barnum about 1.5 years ago, and we did this enterprise deployment with FileMaker Server conversation. I don't know if I would rather do workers or would actually rather spin up 5 separate unique FileMaker servers in different geographical locations. Because with that demo, what we had is that the situation with the workers is that really you have one core database server and it has a bunch of assistants that are going to handle WebDirect and things like that. In fact, Claire said they had 1,000 WebDirect users. I don't know what those WebDirect users were doing, probably not all running reports at the same time, but basic data entry, I would imagine. However, that scenario is like where if you have 1,000 people in a building or in a geographical area, if you have 1,000 people spread around the globe, I really think you probably are better off not using the worker scenario where you have these assistants. You actually have 5 or 6, however many different FileMaker servers. And what you do is you use Mirror Sync from 360 Works, and I don't make any money from them. I can just tell you, I've seen it. We played with it. We made it work. We had a server in Mumbai, India, Japan, Australia, East and West Coast United States, and then EU, a couple places. And you'd have 5 copies of your solution, or however many. Like you have a copy, a starting point. You have a master copy, then you copy it to all the other locations, and you turn on the sync, and as you edit and make changes in one geographical location, it replicates over 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds to the other geographical locations. And if here's the deal, this is the kicker, one is that you access the closest FileMaker server. That was part of the conversation. So you don't have, like if someone's in India and they're trying to access a server in the United States, right? Do you really want to have someone have 300 millisecond latency? That's really slow. But if they have their own server there, they could access it very fast. And if a server falls over, then the other servers can pick up the load, right? And so in the case of the worker situation, if the worker falls over, that's one thing. But if the main FileMaker server falls over, you're down, period, end of story, right? And I would rather have better redundancy and better localized performance, just me talking out loud, right? So,
yeah. But you can combine it if you want.
No, you could do both.
You don't need to have the worker in the same building as the main database.
Yeah. Oh, so you could have them. Well, I never even thought of that.
You could have workers spread over the whole US and have a central server for the data center.
One backend. Yep.
Just as long as that backend doesn't fall over, then you're okay, right? So that's kind of that rub. I mean, we're always back to this issue of how much do you trust the platform not to fall over, right? So, which actually brings up another topic that came up, and I'm just gonna segue straight into that. Jacob knows where I'm going. So Claris Marketing has always insisted that when you install FileMaker Server, the default configuration is that the server auto opens any files that are in its realm of responsibility, the database directory. It auto opens, which is fine if the databases are okay and there's nothing wrong with them. If the FileMaker servers crash because the janitor comes in and plugs the vacuum into the battery backup, which I've had people do, or plug in air conditioning units into.
I had that happen. Yep.
Yeah, it's horrible. And then the server restarts and it opens up the crash files, which violates our #1 rule. All of you know, if you have a crash FileMaker file, you don't use it. You can reference it if you want to talk about it. You want to see the data that's in it. You go to the last good backup always, because the road to FileMaker hell is paved with opening a crash file. Doing it once, you're probably okay. Doing it 5 times, you're probably okay. Somewhere beyond 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times, there's this magical line that you get to where your FileMaker file will be irrevocably damaged, right? It's not patchable or fixable. It's toast. You've got a serious problem, okay? And so Claris Marketing has always thought that teaching people to restore from the last good backup was bad for business, okay? These are for people who don't actually use the product, right? So they want other people who don't really understand the product just to magically plug in the server and it works. It doesn't support that yet. So Claris had a technology called Startup Restoration, which was their ability to, and you can help me, Jacob, any moment here, you could take over the conversation, but there was the idea that FileMaker would kind of keep track of the file, and in the event that the power was shut off and the server restarted, it would glue the file back together coherently and everything would be great. And they turned that on, and I asked the product management team and engineering down there at Claris for technical information on it. Wim DeCourt from Soliant, who I have a great deal of respect for, fantastic guy, asked the same question. Neither of us got answers, which was when you ask a question to people and they don't have an answer, it pretty much means either the answer's bad or they don't know. Either way, with technology that could destroy your hard work, no bueno, right? And so, Jacob, I'll let you jump in here. But Startup Restoration, they ended up killing it because it wouldn't work at all, right?
Yeah, it got ripped out of the product in 19.0, and I don't know if they kept that in their cleaned up version of this recording that they did, but Wade noted that basically called out that the new version of this thing, the V2, is
So back up. I haven't even introduced this idea yet. So
okay.
Claris had this tech that would actually make it worse. It would destroy the file even worse, okay? So instead of you having working a crash file, you get a crash file that the engineering department at Claris had sprinkled gasoline on and blown it up with M80s and cherry bombs and stuff, right? Bad juju. right? And so they pulled that feature out. Then they said, well, we really like it if this thing would just manage itself. So we're going to try again, right? So then what is the new version of this? It's not called startup restoration where it's called.
It's not called startup restoration anymore. It is called persistent cache with quick server restart. So in the same way that startup restoration was two features combined, and we complained about that at the time because there was a performance targeted set of improvements that were tied to this kind of restoration process. And those were, one builds on the other, but they were technically two separate things and could have been, shipped separately or had different toggles attached to them or something like that. So you can turn them on and off. And they didn't provide us that. So the new one also is the same thing. It's two different, but they're only talking about the performance one or the restoration part of it this time. And so essentially, there is a similar to the old technology. They keep track of recent, we'll call it transactions. We don't mean the script step thing that's been introduced. It's just database operations. Think of it that way. They keep track of the recent ones. Those get stored, in this case, in memory. And there's an additional toggle where you can save them on disk also, for increased persistence is how they talk about it. Which is what it sounds like. It's going to write those things out to the hard drive and so if it's on the hard drive, when you come back up again, you have a copy of those sitting around. Perfect. And so the general concept is with that extra copy of recent operations that has been kind of kept aside, if like FileMaker Server specifically, that process, you remember we talked about the collection of processes that make up a FileMaker Server before in different streams. So the FileMaker Server process, particularly if that one crashes, I don't know if it will fully support or is intended to support the like power plug situation, but that's actually what they demoed in the stream. So maybe he said it's not going to be infinitely smart and just save your bacon every single time, but it'll help in that situation also. But in any case, we have that extra copy set aside of all the recent operations. And so when FileMaker Server crashes that individual process, if nothing else has gone down, it will try and start the database server back up again. And then it'll have that recent extra copy of recent operations, and it'll kind of do the same thing as startup restoration did, which is look at the crash database file on disk, look at these recent copies of different operations, and kind of compare the two and make the file whole again, and as usual, run it through a consistency check, blah blah blah. If everything passes, it gets brought live again. And so as with startup restoration, the theory is this will help you in crash scenarios, certain power loss scenarios, etc., with basically increased resiliency of the server because it's able to recover itself under certain limited circumstances, basically.
So Christian Schmitz wants to say something, but I'll just point out this is a preview feature right now, so it's not officially official.
And it's not on by default.
It's not on by default. So Christian Schmitz, you have thoughts on the new startup restoration? What do we call that? Persistent cache with
Well, we will see how well it works, and I think Claris needs it for the cloud offering because they don't want to fix anything there. It must run automatically.
So you're saying they're building this to support their own internal cloud service operation? Okay. Yeah. That's always an important thing, right?
I would agree that is at least one of the drivers involved with that feature, because if you think about. What are we calling it? It's Claris Cloud. I think that's the name for it, right? They're hosting your databases and stuff for you. Do you want your cloud engineers logging into the individual servers to recover random clients' databases? I think generally speaking, the answer to that question is no. And so they'll need to, they have all these reliability improvements. They've told us about them. They're every new one of these releases for at least the last couple versions, they've touted how many hundreds of bug fixes they have in the server product and stuff like that. Obviously, we only find out about a selection of those basically, but they've been talking about that, and that number keeps going up every time, and that's great. But probably one of the drivers associated with that is their own, scratching their own itch, if you will.
Yep. All right, Christian Schmitz, next idea thing that was covered in the live stream. let's have you pick up the next one. What would you like to demonstrate or talk about from the under the hood?
Yeah, well, we could maybe start with some perform script on server with callback. I think that is very useful for people.
Okay, do you want to show your screen?
So welcome to my screen.
Okay.
I have a little test server running here with two databases. And so I will just open the test database. Oh yeah, admin. So let's just make a new test here, make a new script. So this would be the script running on the server. Running on server. The script could do anything. I will just maybe log it. So I will use here mbs log to log the script parameter. And we will return something. Let's say here from server script. Then we may make the script in the client, back on the client. And maybe show a dialog box. And here we can show the parameter. And we show the result. Get script result. That needs to be get script, yeah, typo. Back on client. And now we have a script to call it. Perform script on server with callback. So I pick the first script on the server and I pick the callback script. And here you can put in a parameter, of course. Now this parameter is passed to the server script here, sent to server. And the callback script also gets a script parameter. So you can maybe pass in some record ID, some context, some JSON, whatever you like.
Just to be clear, and this is not immediately obvious, but when you're passing this script parameter, this is going to go round robin all the way back to yourself, right? That's what this, yeah. So you're basically calling a script back on yourself and you're passing yourself a parameter in a very roundabout sort of way, So
yeah, and important thing is this back on the client. This script is maybe running, maybe not running. If your FileMaker is busy, it will run later when it has time. And if you get disconnected, it will simply never run.
Yeah, so let me jump in and just clarify a little bit on that, and then you can run the demo. So we're starting to get more scripts or processes that can call a script in the FileMaker platform, the Claris FileMaker platform, where the activating script doesn't know the context it's in, right? So when it activates, it doesn't really know what layout it's on. Initially, it has no idea. And so you have to kind of take that into account when you call the script. You don't know what layout on, what the found set is, any of that sort of thing, because it could fire at any time. It's very much like the on-timer kind of detonator script that they have, the on-timer window timer script. And so it fires, but it's kind of a low priority script. So it makes sure that everything else you're doing that's essential is done. Then it does like some cleanup. Is there any scripts that I still need to run? That kind of idea. So
yeah.
That's
so always in your server script, you have to switch to the layout, go to the record, because I get a lot of complaints from clients which just run a script on the server. And since the context is not transferred, they are not in the correct table, not in the correct field.
That's correct. Yeah. So when you call a script on PSOS, the server side does not know the context it's operating in, right? In fact, it even runs a startup script and a closing script like an end user, right? So these are things we've covered before in our training, but we're starting to see these kind of themes recurring, right? FileMaker is all about context, but what if you have a situation that drops the context and it doesn't support it, right? So then you have to make sure you think about that objectively. All right, what are we doing here?
So I'm running the script, and we get our message box running from our callback script. So the parameter is what we send to ourselves, and then there's a result from the server script. And we can also see here on the log, where is it? Standard.
You have to scroll up.
Oh yeah, there it is. So we see here the parameter is printed to the log file.
So this is the monkey bread log file, right?
Yeah, this is our log file, but you could also use FileMaker functions to write a text file if you like. But I'm always using the log feature because the server script is running blind, so I don't see anything, and I have to log every hour, so I have an idea what's going on. And while we are at logs, how about using the new log feature here?
Mhm.
So let's see, log settings. Here is the switch. Allow script error log.
And that's new right there. So that allows you that as PSOS, as Ruben is having fun with, PSOS or sassy run, any errors will be written there separately, so you can dig those out.
Yeah.
David Angel asked a question. So it's a perform script on server with callback. Can it call back any user? The answer is no. It's obvious to me that if Claris can call back to your computer and tell you to run a script, they can call any client and tell any client to run a script. All you have to do is have that way of identifying the client uniquely. And I think they have that client session function that's fairly new. Jacob Taylor, if you remember,
Set session ID. Yep.
Set session ID. So clearly Claris could do this. They have to decide they want to do it. I haven't seen anything to indicate they're actually going to go down this road, but actually calling a script on another person's computer seems to me, as a developer, that's essentially like low-hanging fruit. That's like, duh, stupid. It should be in the product already. So David Angel pointed out the option. That would be great. You could create your own chat, do things like that. Yeah, there's all sorts of things you could do with it.
Yeah.
So it's not an issue of not trusting or one person messing with another person. This is the developer with the administrative controls doing this. And the developer with the administrative controls can run truncate commands and delete everyone's data. So I'm not terribly sure that it's a security concern. I don't know why Claris hasn't done it, but they clearly could here with this, because when they do the callback, they explicitly have to trap which client they're going to call back to and what script they're going to call back, and it has to get loaded on the server, and the server then executes it when it's done. For them to call another client would be trivial. So
it would be cool to be able to tip your I'm thinking like your back office staff. It would be really neat to be able to have and in this case, it would actually be a benefit that it's context free, but like some kind of a thing that calls back and goes, hey, this process that you just kicked off to the server, like it's done. So you can get back to whatever that was. You have a little work to do afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you need the callback to another FileMaker Pro, you can use whatever plugin you like. There are several available, not just mine.
Yeah, but your plugin does it. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, so Christian Schmitz. So whenever
that on a live stream, right?
Whenever Claris doesn't do something, like I had the on window timer is kind of dumb because it's very narrow and limited application. But on user idle has tremendous implications. We did a live stream on that. I used the Monkey Bread plugin to do that. I got it to work, and then Christian Schmitz scolded me that I did it wrong or didn't understand it, and I told him his documentation sucked and he should write better documentation. That being said, these things, most everything we're talking about today, we can do already with a third-party plugin. I think the question is always like, what low-hanging fruit will Claris peel off the tree and stick in the product? And every time they do that, it's like a Monkey Bread is the research base elements plugin, and the Monkey Bread plugin are like R&D for Claris's future deliverables, right? For their product. It's kind of funny, but
okay,
not being positive, absolutely, right? And so
let's cause a few errors. So I need to use error capture.
Cause errors. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, on a server script, error capture usually you only use it on FileMaker Pro to suppress the error dialogues. Now let's here go to layout or whatever, and by name, and I just say XXX. This doesn't exist. Set field, and I just pick a field. I'm not in the layout, so make sure I'm not in the layout. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
What could I do? Otherwise, I could perform script without specifying the script. So you see.
Okay.
And now let's run this on a server. And now go and look for the error log. There it is. And here you see errors like go to layout and perform script caused error. Set field didn't cause one. So interesting.
Is that if that field's defined, it doesn't have to be on the layout, right? So set field is generally context free.
Okay.
Unlike the insert command, which is very deliberate. So yeah, so as long as that's a real field, then you're set. That'll work.
And you can just leave it open. Let's run it again. And now here's a reload button, so you can see the new errors.
Cool. So what about the open on window transaction? Do you want to talk about that one, Christian Schmidt, a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let's just make a new demo database.
Because I was playing with it, and it's one of those things that you really want someone else to build the sample file for you. Because unless you just have all sorts of free time and you have no other commitments, you have to sit and beat your head against the wall on this one a little bit.
Okay. Well, the first thing you could do is you could make a script trigger. Let's see here on commit transaction or whatever. You give it a name, and you can say some dialog. Get script parameter. We could just look what we get. Then we have to copy the name here, so we have to remember the exact spelling of the name. No, we don't. Oh, sorry. File options. And here's the new one. And we select a script. So we have to remember the field name. So we can just put in the script, and now we can make a record, put in a value, and save, and we see what we get.
So what's important about this, and I guess there are two great blogs that were put out by Soliant Wim de Court talking about this a little bit. But essentially in its base mode here, you've got the table at the top of this JSON. You've got table, or correction, file name, then the table, then the command that was run, right? Essentially it's a new record or right? And so while you can use this with an audit as an audit capability to have audit trail, by out of the box, it doesn't do that. You have to add some additional code to make it do that.
I would go to the Claris Engineering blog.
There's that blog too.
Yeah, and they have a little calculation custom function here to assemble you the fields of the current record as a big JSON.
Yeah, see, I'm not going to write that in my spare time because...
Yeah, so let me just copy all of this.
Yeah, steal all that, see if it does anything useful. That would be great.
So copy. So we had custom functions for getting records as get fields as JSON, name it whatever you like, put it in. We can run it here. We see the result already. And save it. And now we want to get it included in our audit. So we go to the manage database and we create a new field. Let's say audit fields, whatever. The name doesn't matter. It's your decision. It's a calculation. And it calls our custom function.
Probably unstored, right? Probably unstored.
Yeah, unstored.
That forces...
Technically, you can decide to store it, of course, but it's just a waste of space. So, and we see it here. It shows us the value already. Next thing is we go to the file options for the trigger, and we put in the field name exactly. So you don't misspell that. And now we can make a change here. And you see that our JSON gets included and the blob we get here. It
gives you all the values. It's not giving you the changes yet. So that's, once again, another deeper demo. Questions along the way from Discord, Twitch, YouTube? Anyone? Claris also said also for the on transaction log, the field be a calc, but why?
Well, technically it can be anything. I mean, you can just go here and you can just type here hello world, whatever. You can assemble a XML if you like. And now if you change the record, you get whatever the field returns you.
Mhm.
So the third value here is always the contents of this field.
So the idea, if it's an unstored calculation, it will refresh at the time it's needed, right? That's the
Yeah.
idea with that unstored calc.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you have to kind of load in there the data that's going to come pre-baked. So the on-window transaction, essentially, all that is like the landmine without a payload. Essentially, it's going to detonate. It'll create JSON. It'll call a script. That script operates with no context. By the way, once again, it's another no context kind of script. Yeah, so that's it. So Lynn from Austin says, why are you not storing the audit log? Does it append itself collected changes? This is not a full audit log demo. I haven't built the full audit log demo because I haven't needed one since this came out 6 weeks ago, right? So that of course is the question, right? You have to have what you'd want to do is identify the before values, the after values, then identify specifically, point out the ones that have changed. And then once those are written in JSON, then you have to parse them out in a useful way on the back end. It's a kind of once again, I don't consider it a beginner, intermediate developer skill set. I think once it's built and canned, you can recycle it, then you can. I don't have the sample. If one of you have the sample, that'd be great. I don't have a sample that does this. Christian Schmitz.
So, yeah, we had a sample recently where we used it to drop all the changes to a Mongo database.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Oh, you already have. Okay.
Yeah, I made that. So you just take the JSON you get here for the change and just drop it in the Mongo database. Make an insert. And of course, you have to open the Mongo database before, and you have to make sure you get your JSON collected with the fields. But otherwise, you would just make an insert operation and just send all the changes to your Mongo database. And then you have basically an audit trail in a separate database.
Yeah, so we're kind of dancing around this a little bit. I misunderstood Lynn's question. So here's the deal with this on-window transaction. If you want to go back to that, just go back to that on your screen, where we said in the file options. So let's go to file options. Just look at that. These, so remember, script triggers come in one of three flavors. It's a file-specific script trigger, which is this list here. It's a layout-specific script trigger, right? Or it's an object-specific script trigger, and then there's at least one outlier, which is the on-window timer, which is kind of this weird thing. So the idea, though, is that this on-window transaction applies to all windows that belong to this file. So one of the things that Wim talks about that, and Clay talked about it, and that is if this thing fires, and like starting point is a single file solution. So in my mind, I would like to write the audit log into the file. The problem is that if the audit log is in the file, when you go to write the data, you will trip the landmine again, right? Does that make sense? Fundamentally, you'll trip it again. So you could get into a spot where you're trying to write the log, but then you're firing another on-window transaction, right? And so Jacob was talking about earlier with me, we were having a conversation about this, that you could write an if statement on that script to say, hey, if you're on a certain layout or wherever you're at, then maybe don't do anything, but you're still firing that transaction. Wim was talking about what is the performance penalties, and the performance penalty they saw with this feature, turning it on a single kind of situation, it's not that big of a penalty. I think it depends upon the calculation that you have down there that he wrote, the audit field. But he was saying like a 15% loose performance penalty, but if you're doing one record, an extra 15% of something that's a half a second, no one cares, right? And
but you have to think about what if you change 100 records in a script,
or you do an import. If you do an import, it fires on every one. So where it does it. So for example, an import is a kind of a bulk operation. It will fire this on-window transaction every time, right? So you have to account for that. The other one, but we always talk about the truncate script step. The truncate script step basically bypasses all triggers and everything and just dumps all the data out of a table. It's like a raw, like bulk erase contents of a table. It's 100% everything. That doesn't trip the trigger, right? So truncate doesn't, but import will. So
we have been doing audit logs for a long time, and you have to really think about how you organize it. Like the audit log will be getting huge quickly. So we usually put it in a separate database. You may also make sure that nobody can edit the audit log. So the idea of having it on a separate server with different credentials can help. So you don't want to have someone with admin credentials messing up the audit log after messing up your data.
Yep.
You may have to do a cleanup script, like your audit log will get huge. Some customers rotate it, like they swap the database file regularly, so it goes to a different one. They may trim the audit log regularly, like delete everything older than a month or two. Maybe delete everything older than a month, but keep at least the last values for each record. So you can do a little bit math there.
Yeah, I think the trick with the audit log is that, we're talking, and I haven't looked at, frankly, audit logs have always been historically a pain in the. This is not necessarily simple, although I think it's fairly high performance. Once there'll be a bunch of smart people. You get the Moyers, the Wim de Courts, the Josh Ormans, all the typical kind of characters that build very, very advanced solutions, and they will probably come up with the fastest audit log, capability using this tool. That being said, just because you write the audit log doesn't mean it's really usable. You got all this JSON. You have to have a way of reporting on it intelligently or reviewing it intelligently or having Jacob Taylor having a flag or something that will trip and send you an alert, some sort of alarm level kind of thing of what constitute, because just because you have an audit log, yeah, that's great. But if the other day Jacob complained to me that, every time we send someone an email or the campaign we send you a notification about a video, we write a record database, and we had 15, 20 million records in a database that we'd created over the last X number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally 14 million.
So if you have 14 million records, we were keeping it so we would know what we'd sent to people. But if that's someone's editing a medical database, like with medical records, you have to have a way of intelligently looking at that, right? Well, what does that mean? What does intelligently looking at that means? What are your criteria for becoming concerned that something bad is happening, right? So
the next thing would be if you have a script which maybe uses 10 script steps to write a record, and then you run an audit script here, which is much longer, then the performance thing is, well, this script may take longer than the script creating the record. Another thing is if you create several records and this audit triggers are queued up, you may not get all of them audited if your FileMaker Pro crashes in between, or if for some reason those scripts don't get triggered.
Well, ideally,
they make you up.
Hand it off to the server. Could you hand it off to the server, Christian Pisas?
Well, the first line here could be a perform script on server, but then you may run into the problem that you only can have so many Pisos sessions at the same time.
Does it?
Yeah.
How many times does it fire?
Well, once per transaction, but on an import, that's a good question. Like I say, if you import 1,000 records, is that 1,000 calls or is that one call?
We may have
one
to test
really
it.
big
Maybe.
Call or 1,000? Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know. Welcome to brand new.
Let me just export one record. Oh, I have to select all files. Okay.
David Angel says he thinks it's one call per commit. Yeah, I get that, but if you import a bunch of 500 records, I don't know if it's doing a commit on every one, or is it doing a batch under the hood?
Oh, the question is, does it trigger at all? And there is one call here. Yeah,
oh, it did. New.
Okay. So now let's just.
How many records were in there?
One.
Okay,
Let me just duplicate.
Yeah, do
so,
same thing over again, basically.
Oh, I exported the the audit fields again. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, tab.
There we go. 6
So-
records. So how many times are we going to get it? Here we go. Go.
1.
Oh, see, there you go. Right. See, David.
Fire.
Let me see that.
question.
So I like to see that. $test. So import again. Oops. Sometimes too quick on 6. So I can't really read it here. So go to the data viewer. Yeah, you get them all collected.
They're all in there. So it rolls them up into one deal and then shoots it off. So that it's actually smart like that. That's useful.
Yeah.
I think that's good. But this is one of those things that, it's not super well documented. We kind of figure it out as we go. So I could see at DevCon someone doing sessions on this, how to expand this out. I guarantee it'll be
all the little details.
Yes. Yeah, a basic audit log for me. This is what I would consider basic audit logging. If you have to dive into JSON, so Lynn, I don't know where your skill set is on a technical level. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm talking about a very simple way just to send just get people thinking of, this is for beginners and intermediate developers thinking about as people make edits. Hey, you want to capture that edit, have it be meaningful, but then have the server do it. It's very basic stuff compared to this. This is very much more complex.
Okay, so below the file and the table, we have the array of the operations. So if you edit one record, you get one entry here. If you edit a lot of records, you get a lot of entries here. It may be interesting to have really a session at DevCon to see all the little details about this. So maybe we go to another topic.
Nope. Yeah, absolutely. So we talked. So the under the hood stuff. So Jacob Taylor, they talked about the new version of Startup Restoration. They talked about the on window transaction, which is still kind of, I highly recommend. I posted the Soliant blogs there. If you need a very complex or very sophisticated audit log, then you might want to go through this and look at this. I think you're using built-in capabilities, so the on window transaction could be a good audit log for you. Right. I would not consider the stuff we just did beginning or intermediate level. I don't see parsing JSON as an intermediate skill set. Right. I mean, maybe for some of you, but if I take most people with 2 or 3 years of FileMaker development and not a programming background, that's a big lift for them. Other things, Jacob Taylor, that were part of this release, right? We had the sending email via OAuth, right? That was another one. I have yet to get that one to work. We played with it a little bit. Initially, it didn't work, and I think they fixed the bugs in it in the update, right? So
we also have the thing we were waiting on, which is the documentation for how to set that up. We can, try and follow other guides and things online for how that's supposed to work, but Claris has some expectations and ways that they think things are going to be arranged. For how their code works, for how that script step works.
Here we are. I'm on the engineering blog right now. So here's the latest. I guess we should mention this. So engineering blog, right? The bottom part down here, sending email via OAuth, right? Version 2. I think if you could stay using SMTP and not use OAuth, you're better off as a beginning or intermediate developer. I prefer using SMTP. That's why the other day we did the send grid conversation. You could still do SMTP with that.
The OAuth is still SMTP.
What's that?
This is still SMTP. It's just a different way to pass your credentials.
Okay.
Like you don't need to pass a password.
Whenever I see it listed on the websites, like Easy Send Grid, people like that, they have SMTP relay, then they have API, OAuth, email in that area over there. So they might fundamentally might be the SMTP protocol underneath, but from the outside perspective, it's an API call, right?
Only for auth. What you're talking about on SendGrid's website or whatever, those are actually different. Those are not SMTP. You feed them the the HTML content of the email or something like that.
Right.
And you tell them, hey, we have this list. It's our like 5,000 best customers. Here's the email because they bought a month ago, reminding them to come back and check their, whatever.
Yep.
But whatever your process might be. But yeah, those are fully API. That's why it's weird, is because you have a new auth mode and the under the hood isn't any different. And then you also have companies that have added this kind of API sending type stuff so that people can do programmatic things that are
Actually like
more modern.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, so here's the engineering blog, Christian Schmidt. You can see this here, right? So there's the persistent cache in FileMaker Server. By default, that's off. It also doesn't have any logging. So when it actually activates, it's not logged. Jacob, you mentioned that as being a major issue for you.
The new quick server restart stuff. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's been fixed in patch 2. Maybe I was the only one that caught it, but most of the demos from the stream were actually patch 0.1 in all the various numbers that you may have caught in their demos. And so I don't know if that's been since corrected, but the thing I'm waiting on basically is I need to know from FileMaker Server's perspective what it thinks about what it just did. That's like super important. And we can't really enable quick server restart or any of this, any part of that new preview feature until like something comes out. We knew it ran, successful or not, whatever. Like
some sort of log entry in the FileMaker Server that it tells us that it did this, right?
Yeah.
So right now it does this persistent cache restart thing, right? Startup restoration thing, and it doesn't tell you anywhere it's done it. It's secret.
Yeah, the only evidence that you get right now, I think, is maybe it tells you once it's done, the consistency check line pops, because that's the thing it does at the end before it tries to open the file. But like we need a how did your cache replay thing go, sir? Talking about the server here, because we need to hear that from it, and it needs to tell us, yep, basically I've encountered 0 issues and we think we're good to go, and then it comes through and passes a consistency check or whatever and opens up. Anything along those lines, minor details all the way out to some kind of wild amount of debug information would be fantastic, but currently there's not even a log entry.
So this is this new option. I don't think you see a screenshot in here, but if you go to the send, that's interesting. If you go to the send email command, script step in FileMaker, you have send from client, send to SMTP server directly, and then the third option is this OAuth one. So Ruben says, I thought it used the API under the hood, not the SMTP OAuth stuff. I mean, yeah.
Nope. The API conversations are only for authentication. So you go and talk to Google and present your little tokens. And if the tokens are good, you get a token back. The token back lets you masquerade as somebody. That would be the way to put it. So you come in with a username and then your password is that token instead of something else. So
OAuth 2 options. Yes, there we go. And so the OAuth 2 right now is Google specific and Microsoft 365, right? And those are both paid services, right? Correct? So
paid only cloud offerings. Yep.
Yeah. So Claris has this option that you can only use it if you're paying Google or paying Microsoft, right? Which is fine as long as you have a paying customer who's writing checks. But if you're doing prototype work or trying to get something for someone going on the cheap initially, right, then that's not going to be an option that'll be a good immediate fit, right? Other things, Christian Schmidt.
Yeah, well, I was hearing a little side thing on the chat after the webinar that the DDR will be replaced with the XML eventually. So save as XML is a new way, and DDR may go away someday.
Ooh.
And I think that's a lot of work.
Talking about the XML serialization. Did they talk about that? I must have missed that at the end.
Yeah, that was, well, you had the recorded event, and then after that was maybe 15 minutes of question and answer. And there were the questions and answers giving verbally and in the text chat. So you should listen to both.
Go back to that. Yeah, okay, I'll do that again.
Another thing I spotted is that they now do barcode scanning on Windows too, not just on macOS. And the curious thing I have is to see if those support the same barcodes actually. Because on Mac, they use the Vision framework from Apple. And on Windows, they use ZBar library, which I also use in the plugin. So
Okay.
I know about it a little bit.
So that is what script is that? Because that's the barcode. Normally, when I do barcodes direct, we're talking about reading barcodes or printing barcodes. What are we talking about?
Reading barcodes. I think it's just get container attributes.
Oh, okay. I don't
And
think
then you can ask for the barcode.
I normally do that
picture.
on Go with the iOS with insert from device, right? So insert a barcode. So they made it cross-platform. That's interesting. Well, they also go ahead.
Another little thing I noticed is that it seems to be a major change to have longer schedule names. So
yeah,
the schedule
called that out in every one of them.
Yeah, I would just change the number and never tell anyone.
I think that they're trying to show that they're listening to people, because whenever I set up backup schedules on FileMaker Server, right? If you want to show your, I'll stop sharing my screen. If you want to show your screen real quick, let's tell people what we're talking about. But I set up an elaborate set of backup schedules because I never want to lose my databases because I kind of think they're important. And the thing is, I will say hourly to SSD, 2 terabyte SSD or something like that. I'll have like this long name that describes kind of where it's going, right? And so if you go to the admin console in here, you go to the is that under backups?
Backups, yeah.
Then down to the,
that's the easy one.
Yes, schedules.
You want script and verify schedule, or you want backup schedule? Backup schedule is bottom left of the backups tab.
Go there and then down. There we go. But
Yep.
Yeah. So if you create a new schedule, we would always run out of room with the name because I'd say it's hourly. And then I also say how many I keep, that because they can't tell when you're looking at the list of schedules, you can't tell how many you're keeping. So I say the drive it's going to, how often it goes to, and how many I retain. I frequently run out of 30 characters. I didn't even bother calling Claris to complain about it. Obviously, some of you did that. Thank you very much for complaining at them, right? But we all ran into that issue, unless you say, make me a backup, right? And that's your idea of a sophisticated backup schedule.
So, yeah, and numbers to keep maybe just be 0, and then you just have one backup, and you just copy it away wherever you like. And then the next one will overwrite it.
Yep, you can do that too. All right, David Angel's out of here. I think we're late. Sorry about that. And PDFs on Windows, Lynn from Austin. Yeah, I missed that one. I was using Windows on 11 Pro, and I ran into the previews working on Windows, and I was really, really thrilled that actually worked. And so, Christian, if you want to show that real quick.
Yeah. Let me just make a new file here.
I think it's not just on Windows, but there's also PDF and DAPI stuff now. I don't know if that does literally everything, but they've been rounding out how that was all different between the different platforms.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to
so you see, I just drop in a PDF and it gets a preview.
It gives you a thumbnail, which is great. Finally, right?
Fantastic.
So,
it's like
and this is using the Windows PDF engine, which I also have in the plugin. But the preview you get is basically the size of the page in points converted to pixels. So you have a resolution of 72 dpi.
Oh, okay. So it's not.
If you want anything else, use a plugin.
Use a plugin.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, we appreciate anything. Final comments, Christian Schmitz, because tomorrow we're going to be back working on our PDF superglue or our digital document superglue, right? Yes.
Yeah. Well, we are thankful that Claris does the presentation.
Yep.
I hope all the developers watch it so they know what they can use, and maybe also clients watch them to learn a little bit what they could ask the developer for.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow for the digital document superglue. It'll be awesome with Christian Schmitz and myself there. Have a good one. report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.